even before we get started with the coding and all, right? The first job is to actually set up the environment. So we first need to install TensorFlow. Okay. So the learning goals: installing TensorFlow, creating models in TensorFlow, discussing the TensorFlow architecture. So these are some of the things that we will be concentrating on now. Okay. So what are some of the installation factors that comes to my mind when it comes to installing any software in the world for that matter? I'm definitely looking at, let's say, a person who has a Macintosh OS, or some other person who has a Windows operating system, or some other person is on Linux. So obviously, the operating system is a very big factor when it comes to installing a software. Something is similar when it comes to TensorFlow. TensorFlow is operating system aware, so we need to take the steps accordingly to make those things happen. One more thing that I would like to point out is that we have a lot of execution hardware at our disposal as of today. So we have something called the CPU, or the central processing unit, which has basically ALUs, cores that we can do our computation upon, or we have GPUs, that is graphics processing unit, wherein it's another execution hardware space altogether. Its architecture is different, all of that is different. So whether or not you have a GPU, there's a big impact on how you're going to install TensorFlow. So be very aware of it. Okay. The environment that you're sitting on, obviously. So even if I say you're on a Windows operating system, is that a physical, is that an operating system that is embedded on your physical hardware, or are we talking about virtual machines here, right? So are you going to install TensorFlow directly on your laptop? Or are you going to install it on a virtual machine? Or are you going to install it in a Docker container? The Python version as well matters. So like I said, we're going to implement TensorFlow using the Python programming language. So Python 2, Python 3, the popular implementations. It requires, or it behooves us to know well about the Python version as well. Okay. So for Linux or a Macintosh, we need Python 2.7 or 3.3 and later. Okay, so these are the versions that are supported currently. For Windows, we definitely need 3.5 or later. So for all those folks out there who have a Python 2 running on their systems, request you to upgrade to Python 3.5, or you may install a virtual environment and install Python 3.5 there. Okay, so in the next few slides, I've actually got some screenshots of the TensorFlow documentation, which basically look like this. But instead of stepping you through these bland screenshots, we are actually going to make our way onto the TensorFlow documentation itself. So I'm going to go over to tensorflow.org. That is their official website. I think I misspelled it. Okay, there it is. Sorry for that. So this is the official TensorFlow documentation. Now, without further ado, I'm going to go over to this first tab right over here, which says install, and I'm going to click it. And from here, I'm going to choose my environment. So I can either do it on Ubuntu, on a Mac, on a Windows, or if I'm on any other operating system, I'll have to build stuff from sources. Okay, so I'm assuming most of us are on a Windows operating system. Unfortunately, I'm on a Mac, but my assumption is most of us are on Windows. So we'll just step through this for an example. Okay. Now, like I said, TensorFlow with CPU support only, TensorFlow with GPU support, both need their own brand or their own treatment for installation. So first, you've got to determine how to install TensorFlow, right? So you must pick the mechanism by which you install TensorFlow. You may do that using pip, or my recommendation is doing it through Anaconda. So Anaconda is actually a distribution of Python with some of the data science libraries pre-installed already. So I highly recommend that you install Anaconda. So I'm going to just search Anaconda Python. The first link that comes, download Anaconda now, is the one that I'm going to click and scroll down, and there you have it. Since TensorFlow only runs on the Python 3.5 versions and later, we're going to download this. So we're going to press download here. It will download an exe file, and typically the way you install software is the way you install Anaconda. So you click a bunch of next, you click finish, done. Okay. So with that being said, I'm assuming you'll be able to handle Anaconda installation on your own. Once it is done, you just install this command, pip3 install -- upgrade TensorFlow. So you copy this command and you paste it on your terminal window, your command prompt on your Windows. And if somebody is on GPU, he can choose to do this. But installing with Anaconda is the best way, like I said. So this is what we are going to do. We are going to, wherever we see snippets, we're just going to copy and paste that. That's how easy it is, first of all. Okay. So we're going to create a TensorFlow environment where the Python version is 3.5. We're going to activate this environment, and then we are going to install TensorFlow like this. So this is again the CPU version, and this is the GPU version. So I'll just step through one example so that things are clearer in your head, and you face no disruptions when installing this thing, right? So I'm assuming most of us are on Windows. I recommended Anaconda Python. You install it. Then what we are going to do is we are going to create a virtual environment by using the conda create command. Okay. So once we create this environment, we will activate this environment. Once we activate this environment, we are finally going to install TensorFlow. Okay. So these are the three high-level steps that we need to take in order to install TensorFlow. So we're going to download our Anaconda Python. Then we are going to create this virtual environment, which is step number 2. Check. We are going to activate that environment. Done. And finally, we are going to install TensorFlow through one of these means. So if you have some GPU, you can install it through here. And if you don't, just do it here. Mostly, again, this is my assumption, most of us will not have GPUs. So I recommend going with this, the CPU version. Okay. Now, all this being done, the next time we run TensorFlow, all we have to do is activate our environment. So this step, we do it, and then this is realized. So we can start running TensorFlow once we have gone through all this by just activating the TensorFlow environment. Okay. So that was some of the nitty-gritties of the install. Now I'll just take 2 minutes to cover the GPU version as well, in case you're interested, right? So we've been talking a lot about this, the CPU, the GPU, and all of these things. I will try and iron out some of the differences, but again, I'll restrain myself from talking about infrastructure and concentrating only on TensorFlow. But sometimes when I do feel the need to really step into it, I will have to do it. So we'll have to go through the NVIDIA documentation here. Now, notice that you may be sitting on a CPU right now, but you may want to try out GPUs, right? So in that case, you just go over to the NVIDIA documentation and just follow everything here so that you can get things started. Okay. For purchasing purposes, for purchasing GPUs, again, there's a very nice piece of documentation on. So I've just attached a screenshot here. There's some very nice documentation on NVIDIA's website on what is the compute capability and what are the GPUs you would like to opt for. Now, obviously, notice that the higher the compute capability, the higher the price. So these are typically your graphics cards as we know it. So the gamers out here will definitely know these things, some of the jargons, what I'm talking about. For all those who don't know, GPUs is basically meant to speed up deep learning computations. That's how I want you to remember it as of now. So GPUs basically is used to speed up deep learning computations. Okay, that's all I want you to know as of now. Okay, so once we are done with everything, I'm assuming you did not hit a roadblock in some way. It is time to verify our TensorFlow installation. So for doing that, I'm going to fire up an IDE or an integrated development where I'm going to write some Python code. In this case, I'm going to use Spyder. So Spyder is an IDE. We are going to use Spyder as an IDE. Spyder comes with Anaconda. So if you just go through your Anaconda Python installation, Spyder will be there by default. Spyder is like your Eclipse or IntelliJ or any other IDE that you can think of. It basically helps us keep our code organized. Okay, we are going to use the Spyder IDE for all our executions. This is what it looks like, and this is the piece of code, the first piece of TensorFlow code we will be running. So I'll just increase my font size so that it is a little more visible. On a high level, it is not at all a requirement for you to understand what these codes mean right now. Okay, so even if you don't understand a single word of it, I'm okay with it, because the purpose here is not to get started with TensorFlow, but to verify the TensorFlow installation. So once TensorFlow is installed, this little snippet has to run successfully. That's it. We don't need to understand how it works right now. We'll step through it when the time comes. So we want to import TensorFlow, run a TensorFlow session or start a TensorFlow session, declare a constant, run that constant, declare a couple of more constants, and finally run the session on adding those two constants. Again, in no means am I expecting you to understand what these mean right now, but on a high level, if you see here, I've got two print statements here. And if this program were to run successfully, I should see some progress here. I should be able to see this hello string printed. So I should be able to see hello UNP from TensorFlow as an output, and I should be able to see a plus b equals 42. Okay, since a and b are 20 and 22 respectively, and in this statement we are actually printing a plus b. So here I need to see hello UNP from TensorFlow, and here I need to see a plus b equals 42. If I see both those outputs, I am satisfied. So I would direct your attention towards here, the console, and I'm going to execute this code by pressing F5, and there you have it. Hello UNP from TensorFlow and a plus b equals 42. Okay, this is all I wanted to know. So this confirms that we have a successful TensorFlow installation on our machines. This is the way you would confirm. Once you have confirmed it, we can really move on to some nicer things on TensorFlow.